This is lesson 4.1. Students need to have their textbook out, open to page 258. In this lesson, we'll kick off our fractions unit where students will be learning how to estimate the products of fractions. Products, remember, means multiply. So we're going to be multiplying fractions, but we're just estimating. We're just finding approximately. On the top of page 258, they start with our first strategy, and it says to estimate using compatible numbers. We've done this before. We've talked about the word compatible. If numbers are compatible, it means that they work well together. And we're going to use compatible numbers to estimate when we are taking a fraction times a whole number. In the examples in our textbook, our first method that they give us has us using a bar method. I'm going to kind of skip over that method, and we're going to go right here to using compatible numbers. So here's our original question. Estimate 1/4 times 13. I can't find 1/4 of 13, but I know that finding 1/4 means I'm going to divide by the denominator of 4 and multiply by the numerator, which happens to be 1. But 13 doesn't divide by 4, so I'm going to round 13 to something compatible, something that I know will divide by 4. 13 is closest to 12, that's the closest multiple of 4, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. 1/4 of 13 is about 3, because I know 1/4 of 12 is 3. So we're estimating, finding something compatible, a number that will divide by the denominator. Looking at the next example, we're estimating 2/5 of 11. We're going to have to divide by the denominator, and the denominator is 5, so we need to round, change 11 into something close to 11 that I know will divide by 5. That makes it compatible. And since 10 is the closest number that divides by 5, 1/5 of 10 is 2, so 1/5 of 11 is about 2. But this fraction here isn't just 1/5, it's 2/5. So if 1/5 of 10 is 2, then 2/5 we have to multiply by 2 and get 4. So 2/5 of 11 is about 4. I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'll have you do the last two got it. So for letter A, it's 1/5. We're going to have to divide by the denominator of 5. So I need to change 16 to something that will divide by 5. I'm going to find 1/5 times 15. 15 is really close to 16, but it will divide by 5, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. So you try the last two, write out, make sure you write whatever it is that you change the whole number to so that it will be compatible with the denominator. Don't forget to also multiply by the numerator if it's something other than 1. Pause the video, work them out, and then check. Alright, so these might look a little bit confusing, but so for letter B, I changed 13 to 12. 1/6 of 12 is 2, but since there are 5 6, I multiplied by 5 to get 10. For letter C, I changed the 23 into a 24. 1/4 of 24 is 6, and then there are 3 of them. 6 times 3 is 18. Turning to page 259, if we're multiplying a fraction times another fraction, it gets a little bit trickier, and it's hard to estimate very accurately. And so we are going to talk about rounding to either 0, a half, or a whole. So we talked about how to tell when a fraction is a half, and then being able to tell, so if it's bigger than a half, is it closer to 1 or is it closer to a half? That'll be the next step for us to figure out. If you know it's less than a half, is it really small, almost 0, or is it close to being a half? And in this, using this strategy, we're gonna round each of the factors to 0, half, or 1, and then multiplying them together. So let's look at this example. We have 1/3 and 7/9. They give us a nice little number line here so we could decide, is 1/3 closest to 0, a half, or a whole? And in this case, 1/3 is getting pretty close to a half. It's closer to a half than it is to a 0. So we're going to change 1/3 into a half. And then 7/9 is way up here, almost to the 1. So we're going to call that a 1. 1/2 times 1 would equal 1/2. So we're going to say 1/3 times 7/9 is going to be somewhere around a half. And that's all the closer I'm asking you to estimate. Here's another example. So we have 1/9 times 4/5. We should, if we want to use this number line to tell 1/9, if I divide this up into ninths, 1/9 is way down here somewhere. Okay, 1/9. It's only 1 out of 9 pieces. It's pretty small. Now 4/5 on the other hand, that's almost all the way up to the fifths. So that one, this is 1/9 down here. And 4/5 is up here somewhere. Okay, so we're going to round. 1/9 is way at the bottom, so we're going to change that to a 0. 4/5 is way up close to 1. We're going to change that to a 1. But a 0 times 1, 0 times 1 is 0. My answer isn't going to be 0, but it's going to be really small, close to 0. That's all I need to know, is that it's going to be a very small fraction close to 0. I'll do one of the got it's with you, and here's how I would like you to show me what you're doing. So I have to stop for each fraction and decide, is it closer to 0, half, or 1? 5/8. I know that the half would be 4/8, and 5 is just a little bit more than that, so I'm going to round 5/8 to 1/2. And then I have 9/10. 9 is almost all of the tenths. That's pretty close to 10/10. So I'm going to say that's close to a whole, so that's going to be close to a 1. And 1/2 times 1 is 1/2. You try letter E and letter F. Show me that you round it to 0, half, or 1, and then multiply those two together and see what you get. All right, for letter E, I rounded this up to a 1. It's almost all 6/6. This is almost all 10/10 again. 1 times 1, my estimate is about 1. For letter F, 5/6 is almost to 1, but 1/9 is barely anything, so that's a 0. Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. Okay, 0, half, or 1. The last example on page 260 is actually a pretty important one for us because we have a whole different set, a whole different kind of things. We have mixed numbers in this example. We're multiplying mixed numbers. When we have mixed numbers, we should round any mixed number to the nearest whole number. So in this example, 14 and 7/8, you have to decide, is it closer to 14 or is it closer to 15? So you have to look at 7/8 and know, yikes, that's almost another whole, so I round that to a 15. But now 6 and 1/8, 1/8 is not much, so I'm going to round that down to a 6. Then I have to multiply those whole numbers together, and 15 times 6 is equal to 90. So the area of this is going to be about 90 square feet. All right, so for this introduction, and we're estimating the products of fractions, depends what kind of fractions we're looking at. If you take a fraction times a whole number, round the whole number to something compatible. If you're doing a fraction times another fraction, change them, estimate to 0, 1, or half. And then the last example, if you have any mixed numbers, round the mixed numbers to the nearest whole. Good luck.